Afternoon, everyone. So we do have apologies from Paul, who's at a funeral. Jonathan is ill. Not sure where Councillor Young and Councillor Barker are because they were in a meeting at 10 o'clock this morning with me, so they should be around somewhere. And we've not heard from Councillor Boyle either in terms of his participation today. Councillor Grimstone will be late. Yes, he's had some unexpected staffing issues at work. So, we've got a busy afternoon and we've got a number of big things on our plate with Local Water Done Well as later in the day NZTA coming to talk to us as well. So, looks like we've got the team ready and geared up to talk to us. So, let's get into it. Who's handling? Rob, are you doing Daniel? The boss? Don't know one wants to hear from her. I'm talking about your machine, not you. You want this one?
Oh, no, there we go. We're good now. Yeah. Afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. It is a team presentation today, which really is a reflection of the internal collaboration that is happening on this project. It is a pretty significant project, and as you know, there are a number of work streams that's requiring input from different parts of the business. Councillors will recall the presentation from last week where I took you through the work that we've done to date, the decisions ahead of us, and where we are today is in a position where the team are going to take you through the draft consultation document, get your feedback around how that's been framed up and some of the key messages. I really want to emphasise that we're taking a deliberate process here where things aren't 90%, they're not 95%, we're kind of in that 70% space, but we know how important it is, the decision that you have on the 5th of May when you adopt the consultation document. So this is not the first and last time you'll see this work. There are a number of workshops over the course of the next few weeks, both on the financials and on the consultation process. But given that Palmerston North City Council adopt their consultation document next Thursday, it was important that we seek some alignment across the four councils, hence why we are here a little bit earlier than we would probably have liked to be. And so in advance, a huge thanks to my team for doing a whole lot of work to get here today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to lead the presentation.
Good afternoon, councillors, Your Worship. Just stepping through the discussion points that were put together in the last week or so. It's fair to say that we do find ourselves in a bit of a precarious position as we develop a consultation document, as well as bring together some pretty crucial information around modelling and financial options and things like that. So it's probably fair to say that we're learning as much as we are developing the consultation document, which wasn't a great position to be in. However, realise the importance of getting the consultation right, given the fact that we want to avoid, if we can, an LTP consultation process. As Nick mentioned, we're about 70% through the document at the moment, so we got some important reports to come in, so I'll go through those as the presentation goes through. But key discussion points today is the overview of the structure of the consultation document, key dates and proposed community consultation approach, what we're focusing on, and this is changing ever so slightly as we move through the consultation document in respect to the 4 service delivery options, which is the 4 council option. The two councils CCO option, which is HDC and KCDC, a backup or an insurance option, which is probably more based around those wanting out of this process to go into partnership, and a status quo, which is HDC on our own. We find ourselves working with three councils that have different preferred options, which is possibly more unhelpful than anything. This offers us challenges as we navigate the transition and through the consultation document. So, to my previous point, when we meet from a PSG perspective, there's as much education going on there as well amongst the three councils as we work hard to get on the same wavelengths. Iwi and Hapu engagement, while we're working at pace, it's important to engage with Iwi and Hapu partners as early as possible, so we envisage that we will get into that as soon as we start getting some accuracy to our consultation document, bringing them in as early as possible. Assumptions and modelling to be finalised. We are getting, all four councils are getting their option modelling information from Morrison and Lowe tomorrow. On Thursday, so that's where we'll be engaging a lot of our time over the next couple of days as we pour through that and understand key parts that need to be in the consultation document and fed through to you as elected members as well. Investment profile of all councils over time to be finalised as well. Jacinta will talk a little bit to that as we go through the consultation document, and then supporting documents and shared frequently asked questions across the councils as well. And then final consultation document and other key marketing and comms elements, which Lisa's going to touch on. What we'd like your guidance and input on as we progress through the CD in the next couple of weeks, and as Monique also indicated, we're meeting on the 5th next week to talk more around the finance and the modelling options. Have we missed anything? And so we'll get a lot of this information out to you guys as it comes to light. But please feel free to provide feedback when you see in real time anything that you want to provide feedback on. And then we also wanted to look at elected member availability for consultation as well. So, stepping through the consultation document, as mentioned, we're about 70% complete so far. Key financial information and investment profiles will be included in next week's workshops. We're expecting them tomorrow. Sorry, mate. Thank you. To assist with maintaining this, council officers at all four councils are currently working at pace and preparing the individual consultation documents. We are all working from the same consultation document, but as you can appreciate, each consultation document will be drafted around their preferred option and have different information pertaining. So ours is very much focused on Horowhenua District Council, of course. The modelling report due from email tomorrow is crucial to completing the consultation document. As mentioned, Iwi and Hapu engagement is set to start early February, which is very much Sunday, as the content and accuracy of the options and the draft CD become more transparent and accurate. Preserving HDC's ability to pivot to another option and avoid consultation when doing so is crucial. So we might get through this and the other three councils opt in a different way that we're opting. And so we need to have the flexibility and ability to pivot on what they decide. So it's important that we have an insurance backup option and that we need to include in the consultation. It's also a requirement to clarify and document. Need to ensure we have a simple 30-year investment profile. I mentioned that already, and I'll let Jacinta to talk to that. This is a requirement to clarify and document the differences between the DI and Morrison Lowe report. There are several potential operational efficiencies that would come in Formula 4, 2, or a backup CCO. A work stream will be established as part of the PSG to focus on developing a number of high-profile or high-level operational scenarios. as I see it, there's probably three sides to this. We have our assets and our sustainability model, which is gained from partnering with other councils, but there's also operational efficiencies that we need to probably understand from, which is the other side of it, that we need to understand as a council as well. You can imagine informing a CCO, which will provide a lot of those operational models, and with councils all being directly feeding into that CCO or shareholders, there'll be different ways of thinking to what the outcome. So it'll be great to work with the four councils and what they're thinking. So that said, any questions to where we're at the moment on that? Cool. So just in the green are the ones, we've got a lot going on towards September, but the ones I really want to focus on is the green ones where we've got our workshop today. We've got a workshop next week around the financial modelling and assumptions. And then on the 12th, we're hoping to bring you a 95% completed consultation document, even closer, giving you a good opportunity and us a good opportunity with our partners to really provide a high level, good quality consultation document that is well versed among selected members and the other councils. And then obviously public consultation to start on the 10th or the 3rd. So those are the key dates that we're focusing on in the immediate future. It gives you a good idea that possibly over the next 5 weeks there'll be a huge amount of work focusing on what becomes very real for us in relation to options. So I'll hand over now to Lisa.
I wonder whether before we start talking about the consultation, maybe if we just take some pause and spend a little bit of time talking about the consultation document itself. Acknowledging you've got it in front of you, you've not pre-read it because we didn't provide it to you as pre-reading, because this is literally as of 11 o'clock this morning. And what we, I suppose I want to pick on some key themes. And so one is, while this needs to be a Horowhenua District Council led consultation document, working really hard to ensure there is no inaccuracies or lack of consistency across the four councils who are also consulting on a four council model. And then likewise, the two council model, making sure there's no inconsistencies on that option. As you know, this is a really complex decision-making process, and there's no mechanism in the Local Government Act that makes that tidy. And so, in addition to the document that you've got in front of you, what I'd comment is that we've, as well as we've obviously got some work to do to input all the modelling and put the graphs and that helps build the story, we do have some work to do to make sure that we're being really clear with community about the platform for change, like the burning platform, in terms of the legislative environment we're trying to operate in. But in particular, what a pivot option might look like. And we have had some legal advice from Simpson Grierson, which is really helpful because it takes us through a step-by-step process to ensure that this consultation document does not put us in a place where come August we have to do a long-term plan amendment. So we're using all the mechanisms we can in that local water services bill to ensure that this is sufficient consultation to give effect to the government's intentions, whatever council might decide. You'll note that the consultation document, there's some background. It tells a bit of a story about the role of Three Waters and what Three Waters is and how our community sees and touches and feels that service. But it also then goes into talking about the four options, and then providing, I suppose, in as easy readable way as we've been able to pull it together, all the kind of different bits of pieces that contribute to this very complicated conversation. And so the feedback that we're looking for from elected members is acknowledging it's only 70% and there's more work to be done. Kind of, can you see how the story is going to come together? What are the things that you feel are really important that our community can see in this consultation document in order for them to inform their voice? And I suppose any immediate allergic reactions you have, noting that we've worked really hard to get it into a designable format so that, again, you can kind of see how the story comes together for our community.
And just to follow on from that, these are some of the questions that we're looking to sort of ask or answer when we do the consul document. You know, what will the governance structure look like under the CCO? That's what we think the community will be asking. How will each council ensure that capital work is delivered? Will this mean we are paying for other councils' capital work to be delivered? How will such a diverse and rich iwi hapu landscape across the region be represented in the decision making? What will happen if some councils vote on different preferred options? Who will own the water assets under a CCO? So those are all sorts of things that we want to make sure we're answering through the consultation document.
Yeah, it would be great to kind of... Lisa, do you want to talk about the draft key messaging before we get feedback?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Oh, sorry, you're on.
Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Palmerston North City Council and their leadership around this consultation document. So, Liv Wicks, who is the comms manager at Palmy, this is largely a template that she provided all four councils so that we could have consistency of messaging. So we've taken Palmerston's consultation document and applied it to our own context. So just wanting to acknowledge her leadership and the huge amount of work that they've done in putting this together, and also Richard Pearce, our senior graphic designer, who has really turned this around really quickly. This is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, decision that you will make as an elected member. And so we want to make sure that we provide as much support to you as possible, that you feel like we're consulting sufficiently. So please let us know if there is anything in terms of a toolkit that we can provide you alongside this that will make you feel really confident to be out in the public and fronting this. I will say I was really proud, because we're getting together weekly with our various counterparts. I was really proud that I could say that our elected members front every consultation and every engagement, and that you embrace that and that you are there talking to the community about these tough issues, because when we sort of got under the hood, it's often there were certain events like rural games or the field days, for example, where we discussed whether we should have like a joint council representation there, and often those events are attended by staff and not necessarily elected members, and it's just a reflection for me that we're really grateful that you all lean into our consultations and you are the ones that are talking to the community about these difficult decisions. So in terms of consultation, it's sort of a light touch LTP style. So there's a citizens panel in there, couple with a councillor. We'd love to do something like a joint Facebook Live with other councils that are willing. We're just working on that. Obviously there'll be social media posts and Let's Korero, but if there's anything, we'll have a flyer in our rates notice. If there's anything that we missed or you feel like we might need to include some additional events in there, normally we might go to, say, the rates association separately or older persons network. Just let us know and I can arrange those to happen. Wanting your feedback on that along the way too. In terms of key messaging, I think it's important to note that we're being mandated under legislation to consult on water services delivery, and so this is a direction from central government, and we need to make sure that our water services are fit for purpose, financially sustainable, and meet regulations. It's clear that we haven't quite fleshed out the option with Kapiti Coast District Council and Horowhenua District Council yet, because this was Palmerston's essentially. So the key messaging in here is largely around scale and how, with economies of scale, what that means for our water services delivery in terms of reducing costs, being able to be more innovative, being able to focus on environmental outcomes. But we will be adding to this as we start to talk to Kapiti Coast District Council around and get the modelling and assumption from Morrison Lowe around what it means across all councils for all options. One of the things that I think is really important that isn't in our consultation document yet is that comparison over time and Jacinta will get into this, but the comparison over time of all councils' investment profiles, connections and asset conditions. So what are we, if I'm describing this to a layman, what are we considering? What are the main things that we're considering in terms of whether it's valuable or not for us to enter into a certain relationship with another council? That will be helpful, and we're waiting on that to come on the 31st. I've also got a meeting later on today with the other councils, and I'll add to their key messaging as well into this. But are there any questions so far on consultation approach?
I think it would be good to just pause and kind of get any initial feedback from elected members around what you see in front of you, what you're hearing.
I'm happy to kick off if no one else. Do you want to? Did you?
No. Direction of travel is great. I love it. I think this is the first gut reaction is the document's looking really cool. I like how it's made up. I like the simplicity of the messaging. I think it looks really, really neat, and I like the sort of the ratio to text to graphics to way it's laid out. So the direction of travel for me is really awesome. I think the only two sort of initial reactions I have is that second to last question, what will happen if some councils vote in different preferred option, that needs to be given some prominence in the document, as an own section that kind of scenario plays that out. And then the other one, which I think might just have a little bit of sensitivity to it, is the charging for water in the future section, because there's some outstanding decisions that this council hasn't yet made around volumetric charging with our rollout of the water meter program. And so we kind of need to be clear about what that looks like standalone, but also that obviously if we are participating in a model, that volumetric charging will be essentially the way forward. And so there's just some, and I think that the bones of the air is just trying to make it clear about where we are in that decision making process. I don't know if that's harder than
If I might make a quick comment. Is around, that's a key question that as a CFO group in the conversations with Morrison Lowe that we're actively having. There's that balance between the signal that we're sending about what is most likely that a CCO would do, but balancing that with the fact that it is a CCO's decision what they do. And so some of those assumptions around volumetric charging, around investment profiles and what they look like, and around when that new entity may choose to harmonise. So, for example, what you'll see coming back in the Morrison Lowe report that we'll talk about next week is we've asked, the CE group and the CFO group have asked that we have some different options around a 3-year, a 5-year, a 7-year, or a 10-year harmonisation, because what that does is make a big difference to the likes, particularly of Kapiti Manawatū, for example, that may be currently cheaper when you look at that from a relative price perspective, and what that might look like with harmonisation. And that point of when you choose to harmonise may impact those different communities and when they may decide and what they decide in terms of what option is best. So absolutely, your question is a great one, and it kind of fits in that mix of harmonisation volumetric pricing and a mix of things in that area, as well as assumptions around ratios of funds from operations that we might get, and we touched on that a little bit last week.
So the only add on to that was I think there's still a little bit of, so this community intelligence is that I think there's still some sensitivity around why we installed water meters, and so we said it's obviously for leak detection, and that is what we're using it, and we've made some massive gains, and so some like just really unambiguous commentary that said we haven't yet made any decisions about volumetric charging. The completion of the rollout of the water metering program will allow us to make some decisions, but obviously there are also decisions around what local water's done well that might influence or drive that decision, something like that. So kind of, yeah.
And I wonder whether also some more direct commentary around within 5 years, council will not be able to rate for 3 waters, nor will a CCO. The only mechanism for anyone who delivers water to get revenue will be through a pricing regime, which, while we don't know exactly what that looks like, we know that that is the intent of the Economic Regulation Bill, and so that's why charging for water is a reality.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I understand the context in which you're raising that.
Couple of questions, guys. First one, and it's something that question was thrown to me at a function on Saturday night. Something I've raised previously already around influence, and it was a direct question about influence when we get to a big CCO. What it might be, what influence do all councillors and their council have to represent the local communities in water issues. So if we can have something there around that, I guess, because I'm sure that's a question that will regularly come. And the second one around, without reading this, I'm not sure, I've just read you making your opening gambit around scale. What is the scale that the government are expecting? Because we heard from Simeon Brown, who's now not the minister, I know, they want to see scale. Is that still the case? And if that's the case, because I'm sure that's a question that's going to come back to.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously some direct commentary from the former Minister of Local Government. I think we can anticipate something from the new Minister in the coming weeks that will continue to kind of endorse that direction. Can I just test with you, Councillor Brannigan? So, for example, if you go to page 25, and I apologise in advance if it doesn't have page numbers on it. Okay. 23. Was it 23? 25. 25. And you'll see that there's a section there that says community involvement in decision making. So for each option, if we kind of added something that was a bit more sharper, that was like, and what say will council have, if we gave something like that for each option, does that satisfy the question you raise around, well, how will council influence this?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's in the conversation.
Just following on from that, because you've mentioned that it says who makes decisions, and then it says council will continue to make decisions as they do now. Yet on page 10, it says councils won't be involved in day-to-day decisions.
So probably just that is option 3, which is the status
Option
quo.
1.
Are you reading from option 4?
I'm reading from option 1. So Monique's just talked a reference to Ross about page 23, where it says who makes decisions. Sorry.
The only
Yeah. So that example I gave was in option 3, which is status quo. So under option 3, you still would be making decisions.
Yeah,
But
but you
under
also
option-
say that option 1 we won't be making
So
decisions.
under option 1, you won't be making decisions. The CCO will.
Because that's my first reflection on this, is that the structure is not there before the options. You know, what does it look like if the governance model, the structure, how will community be impacted by, you know, the overall sort of thing? Because in option 1, you talk about, in fact, there's no mention really of, I don't know, I suppose the modelling's yet to come, but we talk a lot about the sort of, I don't know, it's the waffly sort of words in terms of, you know, not being direct in terms of how that would actually work, is my thinking, and that we need that structure first, so that people can understand what it is before they get into the individual options.
The challenge we've got, me, Bernie, and so if we go to page 27, which is where we do have, we've got a description on, well, what could a jointly owned council control organisation look like in terms of the governance model. So we've got a structure is not predetermining the decisions of council that are still to come. So, like, the intent of the consultation is not to consult on the shareholding model. The intent of the consultation is to consult on the options, and as a council, and in negotiation with the 4 other councils or the 3 other councils or the 1 other council you might go into partnership with, while it's a here's what it could look like, there's still a whole lot of work to be done on what it actually would look like.
Yeah, okay. But I think to your point, Bernie, is we should reference that.
Well, we talk about on page 8 some important things you need to know before you see the options, and I think that, and we go straight. Yeah, it's around, you know, what it might look like in terms of that sort of structure. The other thing I'd quite like to see is maybe some linkages to government or DIA reports that might explain at a greater depth to some people who are interested, in terms of, because a lot of this is actually being directed to us. You know, where's the economic regulation, or what impact is the Commerce Commission going to have? You know, those sorts of things will also may influence in terms of people's choices and in terms of what they opt for.
Which, sorry, you raise a good point too, because essentially from a sustainability model, in their own way, the new coalition government are pushing us towards this through the incentives. Yeah.
Any other further initial feedback from councillors? Noting, oh sorry, Councillor Buck.
Oh, just generally speaking, I won't use the phrase dumb it down, but what I would suggest is just keeping this real simple, because it just gets into too long, didn't read, or look too long, didn't even bother picking it up. The other thing I just see here is that, you know, I know we have to consult on an option that's not an option, but that is potentially confusing in itself. Yeah, like it's not an option, it's not. It's kind of farcical in a way,
Yeah.
because we're consulting on an option, but you don't actually have it. It's just, for most people, I think they'd find that confusing. Is there a way of explaining that really simple and not actually including the whole option? Because I think that will be confusing.
Yeah, it's a fair point. So I think 2 things. First, about the keeping it simple. I think what I'm hearing is a challenge for how, once we've got this consultation document to 98%, what's the one pager? Like, what's the placemat? And then secondly, you know, maybe it's the sequencing of our options. So at the moment, the backup option is option 4, whether that's option 3 and status quo goes to option 4. And I'm sure the team can think about how we can illustrate the challenges of option 4, which we're legally required to consult on. But as you say, firm advice as officers is it's not a sustainable or viable option for us.
Legally, we can't do it. So it's it's not an option.
Legally have to consult on it.
I know we have to consult on it, but we just option 4 is status quo. This is not legally viable or sustainable, so we can't do it.
Yeah, we need to make sure that the options we consult on, we're consistent in the information we present about each option. So, yeah, I hear you. Just we also need to make sure that we we follow the law. Any other general feedback? Noting, of course, that we want you to take this away. We want you to read it, reflect. We would, really appreciate feedback by the end of this week based on what you've seen today, and that's all on the basis that we're going through this kind of iterative journey of needing to get to a place where come the 5th and then most importantly on the 12th, you've got something that is closer to being ready for a public agenda.
My other quick question was the heading on the front page around read the options, pros and cons, and the potential cost. Are we going to be in a position to be able to actually do that? I mean, I just worried that we're either putting ourselves up for, a no-win situation in terms of trying to estimate what they do, a year or so out from actually delivering an implementation plan and not knowing what those costs might be.
Great question. And the CFO group has been tasked to facilitate that exercise on behalf of the rest of the groups. So we are working with Morrison Lowe to try and understand what an operating budget for a new CCO entity might be. At least to have our best go at it, to understand it. There is a little bit of work. There is some work that we can go on in terms of the work that's been done in the Wellington area, for example. They are further along in the process now that decisions have been made. So we are aiming as a group to have our best shot at it that we can. So at least that the community has a general understanding of what it might look like, because we think it's important to at least give that signal. One of the things as well that going into that as well is that 30-year investment profile, where we talked about that a few times already, is so that when someone opens this document and they go, gosh, I really want to understand what it looks like for me, for my council, and we're currently in it, for example, further south of us in Kapiti, they've got a lower price. They don't have a massive profile of investment in this first 10 years, but in years 20 to 30 or years beyond year 10 to year 30 is when their significant spikes of investment come. Nature Calls, for example, in Palmerston North, they've got a significant investment coming in the first 5 years. So that at least when you're looking at not just price, because it's critical that when people look at and understand it, it's an understanding of what does the price look like, when are the big investments for each of the councils planned to come, and what does their debt look like, what does their price look like, what does the quality or the condition of their assets look like. Because you've got to look at the community has got to be able to see the full picture, because it's not just about the cost of water today, because there's so much can change in a 0 to 30 year period depending on when the big investments are needed. And hopefully what that will do as well is give that picture. If they can understand what does a CCO operating model look like, what is it going to cost to operate, and also for the group of 2 or the group of 3 or the group of 4, does the profile of when people need to make their significant investments, if you looked at it kind of like a roller coaster over a 30-year period, does it look like it's sustainable with each of the different groups? Because you definitely don't want it where everyone's got the same investment in the same sort of 2 or 3 year period. So those types of views we hope to go over with you next week to hopefully give you that view of and to allow you to test with us whether that will allow our communities to picture in their mind what that looks like and whether things are a good idea, particularly for those councils that may have a different view in terms of what their preferred option is, so they can see the full picture of it. So for that reason, that's why we're hoping to do that.
I'm sorry. I just had a logistical question. We noticed a workshop for the 12th. It's a council meeting day. Are we going to have a 9 o'clock start or something? Are we?
I think the intent was to do a workshop after council meeting. Yeah. We're going to need to work through the logistics.
So, question possibly, Lisa, to you. It's around the breadth and the depth of consultation. Is there more to come on that next week or whatever, or is now the time to talk about that?
Now's the time to talk about that. So, just to give you perspective as well, and I've mentioned it before, but there's opportunity for us to go to the rural games if you'd like to go to the Central District's field days, which aren't included in the schedule of availability that you have in your portals. KCDC, for example, are looking at having a community event at an open air movie night, but we need to talk to the other elected members and the other councils to understand whether they would be keen in a joint council a joint council event as well. But happy to take on board any feedback, or if you want us to add anything, please tell me now and we'll make it happen.
Yes, it's really around, and there was reference made to the long-term plan process. And even though noting this is a huge decision, one of the biggest we'd make over many years, there is a lot of it that's driven by the science, by the engineering and that sort of thing. So I hesitate to sort of compare it with that because the long-term plan is about every facet of council. So I guess what I'm saying is it's about smart consultation and opening the doors for opportunities, but not the full-on. For example, I don't see us necessarily going across all those things, all those mechanisms that we did use when we talked about the long-term plan, and also to be a bit miserly, about costs associated with that. So it's giving opportunities, but recognising that this is a very different beast. It's for those people who have a strong interest in this sort of thing, giving them the opportunity. So it's a broad statement, Lisa. It doesn't drill down into what those particular opportunities would be. But just off the top of my head, a couple of things that I think are very relevant. The couple with the council is an existing and very people-friendly thing, and to really give profile there. I do like the idea of the citizens panel idea because that will bring along people who have a genuine interest and have real dialogue. Beyond that, I just don't know that social media, I guess, but I don't really want to spend a lot of money and effort on a lot of other things. Do some smart things well. So just putting the cards on the table, that's just me, but whether other people have a different view, I don't know.
I think we have to be conscious too that we've got a smart, engaged community that will look at Kapiti Coast District Council's consultation document and their preferred option as opposed to and in comparison with ours and with Manawatū and with Palmerston North, and so we have to be really confident that what we're presenting is based in science and factual, and that's really important because there'll be people that are going to be comparing why other councils have got different preferred options.
That's useful feedback though, David, about the smart, it's about right sizing this consultation, like it's really important, but we want meaningful engagement.
Thanks, guys. I think the document's pretty good. I feel that there's probably some stuff in there that's probably missing for me. There's two areas predominantly for me. I don't feel like there's anything in here that assures our community about what we're entering into. So there's nothing in here that says, I mean, all the legislation is going to tell you why we're doing it. But I just don't feel like there's anything that tells my community that we're going to protect their assets. So even though we're handing these assets over to a new established CCO, whatever that looks like, our ratepayers still pay. And that money, I guess, goes across to that new entity to manage on their behalf. And so I don't think that that's clear enough to our community in this consultation document, just through my brief reading. It doesn't tell the story. And I've even noted here about protecting and ring fencing our assets. So even if you were part of an entity going forward, wouldn't you still need to have some transparency of our own part of the makeup? And as it unfolds, it's reported back to us. So yes, you'll have your group, but I would like to consider that in that our community would still be able to come to our website and go, actually, Horowhenua's assets that were put into the CCO, this is what they look like after 12 months, this is what they look like after 5 years, 10 years, that we actually can see, our ratepayers can see how our assets are being used, grown, maintained, whatever, because I just don't think there's anything in here that tells the story, and that for me is really important, being that I'm going to be a ratepayer contributing to an organisation that's outside of this organisation. So I wonder, where are those touch points in terms of if an entity is delivering a service on our behalf, where's the point where they fail that we have a callback? Where's the point in this whole process where something's delivered to a standard that's not appropriate for us, or decisions that CCO are making actually directly negatively impact on us and our community here? Where in this mechanism is the push stop for Horowhenua to say we want to sit down and review what's going on? You know, where are the true stop what you're doing? Actually, we don't want our pool of money to go to PNCC or whatever. Actually, we've got priorities here. So I'm just being real. Like, in that document, there's just nothing that tells our people about the ifs, the ins, the outs, the buts. And I know it might say cut your cloth, you know, but I'm also saying that people actually want good information. I do get worried about our environment, but I've read some of the notes in the back there. Again, we're guided by legislation, but when do we have our own standalone when legislation doesn't work for our district? You know, that's a negative connotation back on us being able to provide essentials to our homes and to our businesses. The other one that grinds me a little bit going through this document is around iwi consultation. I'm going to say this word a lot this year, but tokenism. No decision made. They don't know how we're going to be involved. I mean, do we need to wait? Or can this council actually take a lead in how we might see our iwi partners involved in this process? Or do we have to wait? Because I think waiting is dangerous. Iwi, I mean, every one of these things here need to be confirmed. Yes, we're keeping them updated. You can't classify who owns water. There's nothing in here that references the types of things that are going around water ownership right now in this country. So I'm just being really broad brush stuff about, I want to protect our assets. I want us to support this local water done well and ensuring we get the best for our community, but I don't feel there's any protections here for my community with what we're consulting on here. There's just nothing that says that we're going to look after your interests regardless of what we do going forward. But that's just me. I mean, it's a huge kaupapa, but I don't feel there's enough in here that protects the interests of my community. I don't really care about the other communities. This is my priority, and those other communities actually have to mirror and marry what it is we want to do here in our district. So any CCO we join, we must have similar goals, we must have similar aspirations, we must have the ability to compromise amongst one another to ensure that we're giving the very best to our communities as a whole. But if it can't be done as a whole, then we have to prioritise ourselves. So where do we do that in this mechanism? That's all.
Yeah, so that's helpful feedback, Justin, and I think that some of that stuff we can weave in. Some of it, I think it's about recognising the limitations of the CCO model itself and being upfront with the community that actually, when the assets go into a CCO, yes, council still owns those assets, but council's influence is diminished significantly. Councils, while council, I think we can reference some of the mechanisms like the statement of intent that council might give to the board, but some of the ideas that were thrown around initially around the idea of a water ombudsman, there's not been any conversation about that from the government as yet. We can talk about the role of economic regulation, the role of the Commerce Commission. I think we probably need to dig a little bit on that point that you raised around, well, if it doesn't work, like what's council's ability to pull back or not. And probably all I would just frame is that some of those answers, like the answer is there is nothing. And that is the intent of the legislation, is to achieve balance sheet separation. It removes council's power and removes communities' influence on the future of Three Waters. The iwi hapu perspective, there has been really good engagement with our partners until now. Certainly from my perspective, there's nothing tokenistic about this. I've had one-on-one interactions. I'm regularly giving them updates. There has been there's been an attempt to pull all the iwi and hapu partners from across the Manawatū Wanganui region together into a cohort. Our intent is to try and now get the iwi hapu partners from across the 4 councils together. I suppose I'd take guidance from elected members on, again, it's that challenge around how much work we do around a potential model, so a potential governance model of a 2-council CCO or a 4-council CCO, when actually council still need to make that decision, and I think the complexity of those conversations that need to occur around the governance structure and how the 4 councils might negotiate the role of iwi hapu in the different layers of governance that might exist under a CCO. I acknowledge that work hasn't been done, nor do I think I'm not sure we're set up to do that work yet, but it's probably some conversations we can certainly have at a PSG meeting and report back to council for direction.
I mean, I'm totally supporting that. For me, a lot of that's based on those relationships those council already hold with the iwi, and they should be bringing those conversations directly into this working group and having those. I don't think there's the need to directly engage iwi around what that looks like as a first up. That group that are coming together should be very clearly able to determine that if it's 1 model, 2 model, 3 model, 4 model, these are the iwi involved, and then how far you want to take that conversations up to you. But the reality is those councils should be able to tell us how they already work with their particular iwi, just like we should be able to share with them how we work with our iwi. But you can't get into that iwi space because that's their domain. It's actually providing the platform. How are we ensuring that there is a proper platform in which that happens for them? Yeah, not just to be decided, unconfirmed, and da-da-da-da-da-da. That's what I'm really talking about. Feels really yuck. No, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so I suppose what I'm signalling back to the table is I don't know if we're going to be in a position as officers to come to the table with those options in a way that's meaningful, because that's not the work that's happening. So, like, I hear your challenge, Councillor Tamihana, about taking a leadership role, but that's not where Palmy and Manawatū and Kapiti are at in terms of their intent is not to consult on the model. In terms of the governance model, their intent is to consult on the relationship, the different entities. But we can test that further.
Like just hearing what some of Justin said and something that Ben and Bernie said earlier, is it that under each of the options, or as a standalone section, we could have something that's like sort of headed decisions we're not ready to make or subsequent decisions? So something that signposts to the fact that there are further decisions, further processes, further structures, all that kind of stuff that need to be developed, worked through, consulted on, so that we're just signposting to it, and so we're being really upfront about what we are doing now and what we're not doing, so that we're managing expectations around what this is and what this is not.
Is it, maybe I've missed it, but is it clear in here where who makes the decisions about these things, as Justin's mentioned, iwi hapu involvement? Who makes those decisions about that in relation to the CCO? Is it still something that the councils do? And is that plain in here, or who actually is going to be making those decisions?
I think there's three parts. I think, like, I'll test it, but I think there's three. So council have an influence because in their statement of intent, they can speak to the importance of iwi hapu engagement and the importance of iwi and hapu voice in the delivery of local waters. The board of the CCO, though, are ultimately who makes decisions. It is not council, it will be the CCO board. But they are guided by legislation. So the CCO board aren't going to be able to run amok on the Resource Management Act or run amok on the Local Government Act. But it is the board that will be making the enduring decisions about the provision of three waters. Council's influence on the board is through the statement of intent and through the shareholding committee who appoint the board.
The shareholding committee, can you just fill me in on that?
So the shareholding committee are likely to be a representative from each of the. So if we use the 4-council model as an example, so the shareholding committee are likely to be a representative from each council. It's that shareholding committee that then appoint the board. A skills-based board that has to be independent of council.
And it doesn't matter if you're a bigger council or a smaller council, you still get the same representation, right?
That is the intent that we're running with. Yeah, I know there's been some talk prior to Christmas about the idea of if you're bigger, you should get more of a say. But no, we're saying that it's for each council you would have the same vote.
I just think that what we do with this consultation, we need to be really careful to make sure that to a lot of people this just doesn't look like three waters and drag. Because to be fair, there are kind of elements emerging that make me think that. And that three waters was basically failed because it was so contentious. And this is not meant to be that, but it's kind of, I'm starting to wonder.
Your comments are noted. Any other feedback, things going through your head?
I just like what Sam said about the things we don't know yet, or can't, really give you too much guidance on yet. I think it's important because we are where we are, and there's a few unknowns. So if we flag those, I think it's been open and transparent. I like it.
Any other direction that you're wanting to give us as officers right now based on what we've presented today? Or like we've had some great feedback which is helpful. but I'm not hearing anything that says we're on the wrong track. It's about refinement, weaving those different pieces together, and of course an acknowledgement of the complexity of this beast.
But Monique, the only thing I had a little side conversation with David about was that obviously through the Morrison Low work, we set out some of our objectives as a council, like some of the key drivers, key principles in terms of selecting the model. And so I was wondering whether we should include that up front, but then I also like Mike's point is that we don't want to add just more and more and more and more content. And so only if it fits and we think it's got value add, if we added those key objectives or those key principles, because I think it does then contribute to the story, but not at the expense of making it too unwieldy. So that's kind of, yeah. Because it then picks up on things like the influence and some of the things that Justin said, some of the things that Ross and everyone said. It kind of captures in a snapshot what did we say, what did we use and assess the options against, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, we will definitely add the section about decisions we're not ready to make or don't have the information to make yet, and also that piece around, as a council, the objectives we set for this, and we might bring through some of that wording in your intro to me, Bernie. Yeah.
Okay, so just a reminder, we'd love feedback ahead of the end of this week around the consultation document to date.
What just how about just a really simple, statement as to the nature of water itself and its ownership? How important it actually is to start the whole thing off, to get everybody on the same, to get everybody into the spirit of the thing, that water, no one owns water, it's the same as air, and, just, I don't know, maybe some feel-good stuff like that, which is actually true. I mean, Sam will correct me if I'm wrong, but legally, water is treated legally as the same as air. No one owns it. We all use it, and all we can charge for is its delivery. I mean, maybe, I don't know, just...
Yeah, I suppose acknowledging that there's probably some cultural consideration to that, and that our iwi hapu partners going through a range of treaty conversations with the government might have a different view on that, and so I'm not sure whether... I suppose my advice to the table is, do we really want to start the most important consultation of the year with a polarising conversation that deflects about future options of delivery to a conversation about who owns water? With respect, Councillor Barker.
All I'd just add to that, and this is pure commentary, I find it rather interesting that the idea of who owns water could be considered a polarising conversation, and I'll just leave that there.
Thanks for your time, councillors. We'll move on to the next workshop item.
Cool. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. So
The purpose of this presentation is to provide you an overview of the dog control policy and bylaw review. You will have seen a swag load of pre-reading that came through last week, so there's quite a lot in there, and I'm not intending to go through in detail what is in that, but more so that provide you with the background and kind of the basis behind why a bylaw review, why a policy review, why both at the same time. Although if you've got any questions around that, I'll touch on that during the presentation as well. To actually looking for feedback from elected members around what should be incorporated in this bylaw and policy review. So you'll see in one of the slides shortly around we are asking for that feedback and keen on getting that incorporated into this process, alongside what we've already heard through previous consultations for different purposes around LTP, that sort of thing, just ensuring that we are capturing any of the sentiment, any of the feedback that you might have got during that process into this bylaw and policy review too. And then outline the next steps. So what does this timeline look like? There's quite a lot of work to be done in quite a short period of time. We're not new to that, but just making it really clear from the outset around the timelines that we're working to. Cool. So why a workshop and briefing? What's the question we're actually asking? I'm asking what should be in our what should be in our policy and bylaw review? Are you comfortable? So when we go through this, are you comfortable with the time frame that's going to be brought up as part of this? And are there any points that you think are missing? We're not quite hit the mark. Equally, is there anything that you have an immediate allergic reaction to that we need to kind of regroup and think about how we might address that? So just keep those in your mind, and that's the purpose of this slide at the moment. Keep those in your mind as we're going through this presentation. As I said, we're at the do phase, so I am expecting feedback as part of this kōrero if we can. If not, then fired through to me to feed into this bylaw and policy review. As part of this process, we're kind of looking at gathering all of the information, getting together what we know, what we potentially don't know, because there'll be a lot of stuff we probably don't know as well, and how do we incorporate that into this review process. Cool. So some background. The dog control bylaw is a bylaw that is informed by a policy. It's the only bylaw that we have that is informed by a policy, and that's because the Dog Control Act says we must have a policy and then we must have a way to enforce it. So this is a bylaw that's forced by a policy, the requirement on us to have that. So thought I'd just outline that. So we must have one, and we must therefore go through this process. Just a little bit of the background around the Dog Control Act. So the Dog Control Act itself is what provides the powers to be able to make that bylaw and policy. There's a whole lot of obligations on dog owners within the Act itself, and that covers off lots of the enforcement action that animal control do at the moment. And there are some things that we can include in the bylaw and policy. And so the Act is really clear about the things that we can include in the policy and include in a bylaw. And then what the bylaw and policy does, no surprises here, is it provides our ability to put some local flavour, look at those local concerns, those things that come up locally for us here in Horowhenua. What do we want to ensure within the powers that we're given by the Act are incorporated into the rules for our area. You'll see that there's a note down there. The dog control policy and bylaw is not just about dog owners, but it's also about the public and their thoughts and feelings about their access to public places. So perhaps as you're going through this and maybe you're thinking about feedback, also think about during the LTP process, we went through and got lots of feedback around fees and charges. Why should responsible dog owners have to pay for non-responsible ones? But we also made some really big decisions around public-private split. So how much of this activity or how much of the animal control, dog control role should be funded by dogs versus by the general rate. So just maybe keeping that in the back of your mind when thinking about these things. What are we going to be asking the dog control team to be doing if we are going to then put some rules in the local bylaw and policy around that? So how might that change where they spend their current time? Okay, so briefly touched on this, a bylaw review. So talked about the need for a bylaw because the Dog Control Act says we have to have a policy, which also says a bylaw to enforce it, because you can't enforce without a bylaw. That's how this works. But why now? The current bylaw and policy were last reviewed in 2015. In fact, they are current from 2015. And the Local Government Act informs how frequently we need to do the bylaw reviews. It says no less than every 10 years. So we're at that 10-year space, 2015, 2025. Don't need to be a mathematician. What the Dog Control Act also says is that we are required to publicly consult on the draft policy and bylaw. So what featured in the pre-reading information that you received was, we call it a Section 155 report. So this is the requirements that the Local Government Act says that we need to do as a council when reviewing our bylaw. The considerations that we need to go through before deciding that yes, actually this is the right kind of bylaw, it's appropriate for addressing the problems or the need, and that it doesn't give rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Cool. So that large document, as I said before, I'm not going to go through that in detail, but if you've had the opportunity to read that, hopefully that's covered off all of the considerations, kind of officer thoughts and considerations as part of that process. But happy to receive any feedback before we move on around anything that might have jumped out from elected members in that process. Otherwise, I'll just move on.
Just reading through this information, just wanting to understand, is there currently something that isn't working that we would like to have implemented? And yeah, because I'm sort of reading it in previous times we've looked at this information and thought, is there something currently in place that isn't working that we need to improve on to be able to assist you in the review?
Kia ora, Councillor Nina. So there are a couple of points that in this process I've spoken to staff, spoken to the animal control team, and there are some areas that we would value there being some tweaks. One of those areas is when it comes to the classification of a menacing dog. So this is a dog that has been naughty, got out and about, maybe attacked or been aggressive, gone through a process, been identified as menacing, is that in order to then go through and confirm that menacing classification, it says that it needs to go through and be like a statutory declaration, which is a bit of a time-consuming process for us. And so we take it to the court, we get the registrar to sign it and say, yep, and this is the affidavits process. So the complaint has come through, it's been turned into an affidavit, it then goes through, becomes a statutory declaration. So that part we would really like to change. And we were kind of called to that as part of an inquiry that we made a few months back for a possible prosecution case.
So, where in our policy, adhering to the Act, does it say we don't have to do that procedure?
So it's not so much in the Act that says you don't have to do that. It's more so that we've added it in as something that we thought was a necessary thing the last time we did the review. And so what we'd be suggesting is sort of officer feedback to this bylaw review is that we would make some changes to that, just remove that. We don't believe we need it. In fact, we've had some advice that we don't need it.
Vi, could I just, I've got a thought, something I want to speak to in a moment, but when we look at our present, the menacing versus the dangerous dogs, I struggle to see the difference in terms of the actual response to those categories, because it reading the bylaw, in both cases, there's a requirement to be on a lead and muzzled in public, and also to be neutered. So, what in essence is the reason for the two different definitions, given the consequences seem to be the same?
Kia ora. Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Allen. So the Dog Control Act itself actually specifies those two types of classification. They are called classifications. So the two types of classifications. There's actually two types of menacing classifications. We call it menacing by deed, which means the dog has done something, and there is menacing by breed, and that's where the Dog Control Act informs certain breeds of dogs that have a predisposition for aggression. And so those dogs we can also require to be desexed, on a lead, have a muzzle, all of those things that you've identified. And then we've got the dangerous dogs. A point of difference for the dangerous dogs is that the Act actually also imposes a penalty by way of fee. So the registration fee for a dangerous dog is 150% of the registration fee that you would pay otherwise. So if you've got an entire dog that is then classified as dangerous, you would pay the entire fee plus 50%. But of course that doesn't happen because as part of the dangerous dog classification process, you need to desex your dog. And so it's the desexing rate plus 50% on top. So the Act itself is what informs that in that difference. Yeah.
And just in terms of the where to from here, I guess I just need to ask the question, and dogs, big issue, particularly Northland. I'm not saying we're anywhere near at that scale and so on, but I just asked the question why we would not use the powers under the Act to require mandatory neutering, except with registered breeds of dogs, because the idea of entire dogs having a right to be entire out in public and so on, it seems to me, why would that be allowed? With increasing the dog population, be interested to know how it's tracking here, but nationally it's just exponentially exploding, and I just wonder why we would not look at mandatory neutering. Do you want to respond to that?
So what can be in the bylaw and the policy is informed by what's in the Dog Control Act. Currently, the Dog Control Act, there are no powers that are explicitly given or provided to councils to enable universal desexing of dogs. It does say that there are, in certain circumstances, so menacing and dangerous dogs, we can do that. And where there is within the bylaw a specific nuisance that might have been created by that type of dog or dog behaviour. And so, for example, we've got Auckland Council that have in their dog bylaw that for any dog owner who their dog has been uncontrolled, I think it's on more than one occasion in a 12-month period, and they've received an infringement notice for each of those occasions, that the council can require you to neuter your dog. And that's because of the nuisance component of that constant wandering, and then because everything that we do in a compliance and enforcement space is based on the evidence. The evidence that's come in is that then what's generated is the ability to issue the infringement, which has then generated the ability to enforce it further by requiring the dog to be neutered. And some of the rationale behind that is one, a penalty, but two, also it's reducing, other dogs who are in heat, so unwanted puppies and litters of puppies, so that reduces that nuisance and some strain on other agencies such as the SPCA who see that. But also, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, there is also some science behind when a dog isn't neutered, that they are more likely to be out wandering because they are looking for that companion.
So I guess just in terms of feedback, personal view, is the extent to which under the legislation we can push much further in terms of neutering at every opportunity. And it's in the spirit of the legislation which talks about minimising danger, distress and nuisance to the public. And to me it seems like that can only help. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor, for that feedback. Very useful.
Just from me, dogs in public places one for me. I suppose I want to use Foxton as an example for you, Vi. So currently we're not apparently allowed to walk through town with registered dogs during shop hours, but I can't read it in the bylaw. But after hours, I'm allowed to walk my dog wherever I want, but my dog's registered. So just using that as an example. And then as I'm walking my dog and checking my bylaws, telling me I can't walk my dog at 1:15 in the afternoon through the middle of Foxton, I look to 3 shops on the main street that all have dogs sitting in them. 2 sitting in a cafe, 1 sitting in a real estate, and 1 sitting at a lawyer's office. So who's the bylaw for? Where's the consistency in that? So that's just talking about business owners that choose to keep their dog in their office in our main street. I don't know if they're registered or not. Mine is, but I'm not allowed to walk on my street. And then I'm going to target people who use dogs in our district that don't belong here. So they don't register their dogs in Horowhenua, but they're still on our streets and in our businesses. And it's the struggle I have there because I'm just looking at our bylaw. So we know that dogs can go into restaurants and stuff if they're seeing dogs or blind dogs, but when I look at our list of disability assists, is that just opening the door for the whole world to take your dog? I mean, I could take my dog from the farm and sit in Robert Harris apparently and have a cup of coffee and there's nothing any of you can do about it. So where's the consistency in this? Because I pay for my dog, but I've got rules around me. But people coming into my district who don't pay this council have free rights to put their dog anywhere in any restaurant they want to sit in. How do I feel like I'm from here? So, sorry, but just framing it in such a way for you. The last one was 3, sorry, Bri, because I'll just do a couple charges differentials. So, we don't have a charge, and I think I raised it before, around puppies, and we did. And we took that out, and now we're only registering entire. So now I've heard feedback from not just my wife, but many others that have suggested the same things occurring to them as they get a new pup. So that variation is no longer available to them, and I think it's something that should still be considered. There's nothing in here around bylaws around other sites. So I'm going to use dock. There's nothing in our bylaw that acknowledges dock sites in our district. You can't take a dog into a dock area unless your dog has done dock training. So I just want to throw that in there too, because that's actually our makeup of this district, and there's rules around dock, and we should be encouraging and supporting those types of rules around those types of reservations because they're there for a reason, and we should be consistent with that. The last one is in number 4 is the education. We want to go out and we want to engage primary schools and intermediate about dog control, dog awareness, registering your dog, how to manage a bite. But we don't do it for secondary schools, who are probably the people that are going to own a dog first. So that's just what I've picked up in my really quick going through, but just looking for some consistency probably about how we think and do things. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Tamihana. A few things to cover off, I guess, in some of the questions there, as well as maybe a question that I'll pose to elected members as well around the what do you want to see in there, so that we can incorporate that in. But to cover off a couple of your points, so disability assist is actually some language that is pulled through from the Dog Control Act itself, and so it outlines the within the bylaw, within the Dog Control Act, it talks about disability assist. Then in one of the schedules, it talks about how a dog can become a disability assist, and so it's quite clear in there. But what we could do is, because we don't expect every member of the public or every dog owner to understand that, is we could maybe flesh out that language a little bit more and say dogs that have been identified in the Dog Control Act or something along that, which will make it much clearer for the general user who's going in there to see what the rules are. In terms of the areas to exercise, my apologies, I didn't make it really clear in the pre-reading information, but there is a list that was in an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the dog the dog access areas. That's actually in the current bylaw, but isn't put in the format of the new format. So that's my my fault there. I'm sorry about that, but it does detail out there the bylaw other sites, like dog sites, for example. It does talk about the in business hours, outside of business hours, where dogs can be walked on a lead, off a lead, that sort of thing. But look, valid questions and open to elected member feedback really around that. Is that fit for purpose? Does that serve the same purpose as we might have thought it did 10 years ago? Do we still want that in there? Because this is the time now to review that. Secondary schools, my understanding of when this was originally put in, which was actually before the last review around primary schools, I think they also go on kindergartens and some other areas, was more around our ability to influence what went into the curriculum. And so we had lots of uptake, and we have had lots of uptake over the years from particularly primary schools where they've said, yes, come on in, we can fit you in this period of time, come on in and provide that presentation, which is a presentation that's shared across all councils that the Dogs Association of Animal Control Officers kind of use, is more focused around how to keep yourself safe rather than the dog ownership and requirements of registration, that sort of thing. I'm not sure of what it might look like now to try and incorporate that into sort of secondary school learning, but there's nothing stopping us from reaching out, seeing what that could look like. So I think that is very valid feedback. And then the last point there is around the puppies registration. Look, over to elect members around those decisions. We removed it on the basis that it were the cost associated with registering a puppy, whether it's 6 months old or it's an entire dog that is 12 years old, the service that is provided by animal control and by council is the same. And so the rationale behind removing the puppy registration when we did was because it was that recognition that the service is the same whether your dog is 7 months old or it's 12 years old. I do recognise, though, that there is a difference between a 6 or 7 month old dog and a 12-year-old dog, and that the 6 or 7 month old dog, you might be in the process of getting that desexed, and so therefore you might not be in that position just yet because of the age, the type, lots of different reasons why dogs can't be desexed early on. And so, look, that's something for elected members to consider about whether we wanted to bring that back in. So, and just one final point on that, though, is that everything has an impact on cost. Yeah, so if we reduce the cost there, the LTP already sets what we said we're going to collect from dog owners. How do we then ensure that that's offset somewhere else that isn't going to upset the apple cart in terms of who will pay, who won't pay, and affordability?
Yeah, no, I totally get that and appreciate the answers. I suppose around the last one is probably more around incentivising good behaviour. And so if you're encouraging people to register their puppies at an early age and you're incentivised because it's cheaper, you're actually automatically creating good behaviour and patterns of those people continuing to register their dogs for the life of their dog. So I think there's an upside to reconsidering that, what we did.
Just in terms of process, by the business about being unable to walk dogs through CBD, Foxton, Lynn, presumably Shannon, that's a case for me where it might be valuable during the consultation process. It might be one of those things we choose to highlight for public discussion, because I'm aware, as I'm sure Justin and Ross are, that in Foxton it's honoured in the breach in terms of the dogs wandering, and there's one in particular, lovely guy, lovely dog, it's not broke, don't fix it, it's part of the community, that sort of thing. So while you could argue that having it in the bylaw gives us the ability to act when necessary, I guess there could also be a point of view that says the bylaw, if it's stringent in terms of reacting to incidents, whether it's in the CBD or anywhere else, the bylaw has the capacity to respond where there is an issue, so why not be more friendly and just not have it as part of it? So that's just my 2 cents worth, but I guess that where I'm sitting at this stage is, through this discussion today,
maybe there are key things we would want to highlight in the public discussion document that we really want feedback on, and that's one of them, I think.
Awesome kōrero. Great considerations for leader or us to think. For officers to think about incorporating into what looks like the next version of an update through to elected members. So yeah, very thankful for that. What can go in a bylaw? Look, I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on here, but there's 4 main things that can go on it to minimise danger, distress, and nuisance. That's broad. And what I mean by that being broad is that we have access to lots of data here based on the complaints that come into council, but we don't get to see or hear necessarily all of those bits of feedback that go between neighbours or that happen over a barbecue where people are telling their friends and family about things or interactions that they've had. So that's why it's really important through the consultation process to solicit all of that information as well, to see that our bylaws are fit for purpose, set what we think might be fit for purpose bylaws. Minimise uncontrolled access to public places, particularly children. To the public can access public places without fear of attack or intimidation, and provide for recreational needs of dogs as well. So the bylaw and policy seek to balance the ability for dog owners to be able to go out there and exercise your dogs with the need to preserve and manage, control dog and dog owner behaviour. Also incorporated in the dog control policy is a selected owner policy, and we heard during the LTP process lots of feedback around there being a lack of awareness of there actually being a selected owner policy, and selected owner policy is kind of Horawhenua's version of a responsible dog owner policy. So we heard lots of feedback around that they didn't even know we had one, a call for a review of that policy because some of the criteria is no longer necessary or are really cumbersome or wasn't really fit for purpose. There was some feedback in the LTP process that called for stricter rules and penalties for dog owners that don't comply with the rules. So that was that sentiment around why should responsible dog owners have to pay for those that aren't so much. And the stronger policing by animal control. And that was kind of broad as well. That wasn't just about de-sexing or about dogs being off the leash. It was about, it was a lot about dogs being off the leash. Lots of comments around wandering, and you can only take to our social media pages to see that frequently. This is what the public was asking us for. So it's just keeping that in mind when we're thinking about are our bylaws, so much as we can influence and so much as we can include in those bylaws and policies, are they addressing what we've been asked? But also in this process as well, particularly in the selected owner policy application, that I do propose we change to a responsible dog owner policy. It makes more sense, but certainly over to feedback around whether that should be or shouldn't be. Is there anything else that you think should be included? In the policy and bylaw, you'll see that there is a default rule. You might not see actually, it's not made so clear, but dogs are allowed in all public places on a leash unless the policy and bylaw says otherwise. So it's, I think it was Councillor Jennings who in a hearing once said, unless there's a rule that says that you can't do something, you can do it. Yeah, and so this is that blanket one that says dogs are allowed in all public places on a leash. Yeah, unless otherwise said you can't. Cool. And so the bylaw then has that list of areas where you can't, and those areas that you can then off leash. So exercise areas, and it's been through a review by our Parks and Property team, just from internal officers' perspective. Are there any areas? Have we had changes in the last 10 years that need to be incorporated into there? Does it not really fit with the way that we currently operate in our purpose and that sort of thing? So it's been through that first review, and you'll see that in that spreadsheet of hopefully the colour coding made some sense around the things that were proposed to be removed or added. But do we have those right? do you propose any changes? And I think this will probably be one of the areas that we propose when we go out for public consultation, and I'll talk about that shortly, that we actually really engage with the community around in your area if you're a dog owner. Do you have access to dog exercise areas that are right for you? What do you see? What are the behaviours you see that you would like us to incorporate if we can? Cool. So we've kind of said this along the way, and thank you for your contribution already. But so, what we've been asking is there anything missing out of the review? Is there anything missing out of kind of what we talked about? And we've gone over lots of things for me to incorporate, so that's great. And what do you want incorporated into the bylaw? So, for all of those thoughts that you have after today, if you could put them through to me, happy to receive those. That'd be great. But there's some questions here that we've kind of provided as prompts. So thinking about what can now go into a bylaw, what do you want to ensure gets included, and how does it contribute to minimising the danger, distress and nuisance of dogs? And you saw that in a slide earlier around what can actually be incorporated into a bylaw. Do you actually want a responsible dog owner scheme? So now's the opportunity to go, actually we heard all of that feedback, but is it going to be bigger than Ben-Hur? Other councils do it, so I suggest it's not, and that there is ways and systems that we can put in place to make it work. But that's a question for you, right, and a decision to be made, and something that we can give back to the community. Hey, we heard you. We did say that this was going to happen. Here's what we're proposing, and then seek feedback, because that's what we do and the right thing to do. And then we talked about, thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen, for the suggestion around being as requiring the desexing of dogs at any possible inroad if we can. But, are there other instances that you've identified, or do we want to abolish that and we don't actually require the desexing? Look, I know that's we've just talked about requiring desexing, but those are decisions to be made. Yeah. And if you've got thoughts either way, as polarising as they might be, do include those, because it's important. We have a large, well, it's not large, but we have a community that will have lots of varying feedback, and so no doubt, even if you've got an opposite view, we will get some of that as part of that process, and that's what a democratic process is about. Cool. So next steps, the first draft changes of the bylaw. So after today, I will formulate lots of the feedback we've received internally from officers, put those into draft track changes into the current bylaw document. In fact, that's already started. Incorporate some of the feedback that we've received today from elected members into that draft, and then look to have a first draft of the new draft or the redraft of that bylaw ready for the end of February. Then what we're proposing is to have some pre-consultation with the community. So what this pre-consultation looks like is it's not yet the time to go tell us about your thoughts of what's in the current bylaw, but it's about the specific things that we want to hear about now when we're formulating that draft. So it might be the dog exercise areas, for example. Feed into what you think is the appropriate areas now, so that we can incorporate that and make sure we've got your ideas together. So might be exercising dogs in the main street. We ask lots of information around that, up to elected members, and responsible dog owner policy changes is what I put up there as well. So we've got a little bit of time between now and the end of February, now and February, and then to think about the sorts of things that we might want to solicit feedback on early. Then the updated draft with the track changes to a workshop with the elected members in early March. I think I've put down around about the 12th or 19th of March, something like that. And that's where I will come back to the table and go, you've given all this great feedback, we've got all of this feedback, does it actually capture what you asked? And that gives us a bit of time then to go, no, go away, put some more work into it, and if that's what needs to happen, that's what needs to happen. But it gives us some time to be able to get that done, because the bylaw policy review, something I omitted to say earlier, is actually due August 2025, so that's when 10 years will track over. If not, if I've hit the mark, which I'm hoping I have, then at the 26th meeting of council, we'll bring the draft bylaw, policy, and statement of intent, all of that stuff, statement of proposal, sorry, all of the bylaw review stuff to a decision where we're asking to go out for community consultation, then community consultation for a month, anticipating there'll be submissions. Dogs is one of those things that generates lots and lots of comments in our community. So I am expecting that there will be consideration of submissions and hearings. So we've sort of tentatively said May. Yeah, get ready. And then aiming to adopt the bylaw and policy if we can the 25th of June. So thank you. Any questions?
If I just, that dog information handbook, are you thinking of redoing that? You are? Yeah.
Sure am. Thinking at the moment. It certainly isn't in a work plan, but it's certainly one of those things that needs to be done. We're aware of it needs to happen. I think we're in a position now, prime opportunity really, when we're making those changes to then incorporate it. Yeah. And then so feedback, if we could get feedback back by the end of next week, is that too much of an ask? That'd be really cool. Just those high level thoughts. I'm not asking for you to develop what should go into the bylaw and policy, but more so around what are the things you would expect to see that you didn't see. And I've noted everything that we've talked about this afternoon, so I don't need you to say that again, but if you feel passionately about something and ensure that you want that tone or that theme to be explored more, then yeah, fire through.
Right, the only one for me is around the de-sexing issue that's been raised, and I'm probably I'm wanting to ensure that we don't create something here for good owners, for responsible owners. I'm a little bit concerned when you start putting a dog and a breed of a dog in a list, and then there's expectations around how a dog should be treated is really unfair when you don't. And I think the scheme stuff you're talking about is really, we're just talking about it thinking that's a good way of people logging their activity, their ownership and all that stuff. But I just wouldn't like a policy to inform that must occur because it is a type of dog when we don't have those whole, I just said we know people that have had the same, we would consider dangerous dogs today, but they might be 3 generational families that have had those breeds of dogs and they're actually bloody good responsible people, whereas so it's just that flexibility and keeping that balance.
Thank you.
Can I just check? Based on that point, I understood the legislation prescribes the breeds that are dangerous, so we don't have any flexibility or discretion, right?
Thank you, Councillor Horowhenua and Councillor Jennings. So yes, it prescribes those that are classified as menacing by breed. And so there's 5 or 6, and apologies, I can't rattle them off the top of my head, but there are some breeds in there that are prescribed. But then there is the menacing by deed. So that process itself requires something to have happened to follow it through. And then I think, just kind of lost my train of thought. Something further. Oh, and the other thing to mention as well that as policymakers, and that's not just those that develop it, but you all that inform what goes into the policy, as good policymakers, what goes into the policy should be informed by evidence, right? And so if there's no need for it, is there a need for it in the bylaw and policy? So something to think about as well when we're thinking about what should go in there.
Can we just have 5 minutes?
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors, for this opportunity to talk about the Manawatū Estuary Plan and the process undertaken to date in developing this, and a bit of an outline on future HDC commitments through this process and through this plan as well. Just quickly, in terms of the why are we here today, what are we doing? This presentation is to update the councillors regarding, the estuary plan and the process that's been undertaken to develop it, and all those implications that come out of that plan. In terms of what we want today out of that workshop, it's to gain an understanding of it, how it's required to retain the international accreditation through the Ramsar Convention, and those ongoing commitments as they relate to our organisation. So the question we're asking is, so the presentation is the main focus of informing councillors about this plan, which is in the final stages of it being completed. But officers are keen on feedback about the commitments outlined and also their view on these. In terms of the knowing, it's really about the details of that plan and how it aligns with achieving that Ramsar accreditation. And in terms of the do, it's really about providing feedback back on the process and that long-term commitments. I'm just going to pause here in terms of the presentation and just give a bit of an outline and feedback about the how we've got here and some of the history leading up to it. So I've been working with the Manawatū Estuary Management Team Group since I joined council in 2016. It's always been and remains a large grouping of agencies, iwi partners, and key Foxton stakeholders, with a really huge intent to do what's best for this estuary area. But as we know, good intent doesn't always translate into a structured way about how we progress the desired improvements we want for this natural space as well. But I'm really quite proud to communicate to councillors today that since that I started in 2016, there's been a number of key improvements in how we work together as a group and how that's evolved. And some of them I just want to highlight. So, the agencies have been a lot more active about aligning our respective work programs together and presenting a much more unified delivery approach to that wider MEMT grouping. Just to note that, the agencies are now working and meeting separately before those 6 monthly meetings that we have regularly with that group. I think with the agencies being more aligned, it's had a bit of a flow-on effect with that group, and the kind of the lead-by-example approach has definitely influenced the mindsets within that group, and in that the challenges now being discussed have much more of a we lens to it rather than a them and us mentality, which is incredibly positive. We've held a number of workshops to develop this very latest version of the Manawatū Estuary Plan, and I believe it's increased cooperation and that sense of collective purpose as well. So the actions documented in that plan also have, and it is the intent, is to have that massive potential to take that collaborative approach to the next level. So the 6 monthly meetings are going to be structured around the actions documented in this plan. And so what that does allow is a much more proactive approach by that wider grouping to look at, say, for example, agency processes like the long-term plans, and that's not just for HDC, but also HRC, as well as another important point too about external funding opportunities as well, because there is a lot of expertise and knowledge within that group to be able to take those opportunities. In terms of HDC, I've been a key person involved, but I just really want to acknowledge Councillor Justin Tamihana as well, who's been heavily actively involved in this, contributed strongly to the workshops, and provided a really strong leadership presence within MEMT. So thank you, Justin. I think your input has been significant, and I just also want to acknowledge all of our iwi partners who've engaged in a really enthusiastic way in providing input, guidance and content, which also captures the rich history of the site from a Māori perspective, as well as, of course, the having a strong cultural influence on this going forward. I also want to acknowledge Hayden Tuaroa for his input into the document, which has been really impactful. Early in this process, through Hayden, the Manawatū Estuary team were invited to visit Paranui Marae, just north of Foxton. So this marae is home obviously to the Hapu Ngāti Turanga, and members of MT were welcomed into this space and to have a hui, to engage in mahi, to understand what is important, listen to the various perspectives, and really forge a common bond to progress this plan together. This has really provided an excellent foundation for us getting to where we are today. In my opinion, as an officer, the process and how the participants have all contributed to it is a bit of an exemplar of how meaningful and effective development of a plan can be delivered with our partners, our agency counterparts, and the community. So I just wanted to put that in there in terms of the how we've got here. In terms of just a summary here of what we've been doing, so that and background to the site, the Manawatū Estuary established as a Ramsar site in 2005, and in 2015 a 10-year plan was submitted to the Ramsar Convention. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands is an intergovernmental treaty that provides a framework for the conservation and wise use of wetlands and their resources. So the existing structure of the Manawatū Estuary team, or Manawatū Estuary Management Team, was utilised to actively try and manage and restore that estuary. So it includes all of those key groupings you can see there. In terms of this current version of the plan, we've held a number of workshops over late 2023 all the way through 2024, where we've brainstormed all of the current issues, risks, and potential solutions. So under this plan that we've written, there are 6 distinct sort of activity areas established to try and meet those objectives. And I do just want to say to councillors that in some ways I've had a little bit of involvement with the Foxton Futures evolution in recent months, and it's actually not dissimilar to how that is working in terms of different work streams and leaders leading that within this plan as well. You can see there with under those categories: fauna, flora, pest animals, pest plants, water quality, and community engagement. So there's a good structure about how we move forward and try and manage the space. In terms of which you'll be very interested to know about what commitments HDC have in relation to this plan. So some of the key ones there I'm going to just mention. Obviously, in conjunction, after this plan is finished, we're going to utilise that same Manawatū Estuary Management Team to essentially help us develop a statutory document, which is under the Reserves Act, which is the Foxton Beach Coastal Reserves Management Plan. So I'm looking at leading that work, but it's really a continuation of the same approach with the same members there, given it's worked so well, and we need to consult heavily and make sure that we understand those issues with our community. Essentially, the other thing will be, as I mentioned before, about just reporting on the key activities with the agencies through those 6 monthly meetings, but utilising the action plan in this Manawatū Estuary plan to structure those conversations. We have a point there in about the public places bylaw amendment, which obviously has gone through recently from council. This is an important one here, the beach access bylaw, or beach bylaw, there by September 2027, but there may well be more discussions about that with councillors shortly on that. Dune protection, defining those no-go areas like with signage, fencing, education and compliance. So responsibility about some of those physical things may fall to HDC, but it's in conjunction with what is the community engagement team of that Manawatū Estuary, that wider group. Pest plants. So obviously that's an action in there in that plan, but the removal of marram and replanting of areas where marram has been removed, council has existing budgets there, a coastal resilience budget and also its district-wide pest management budget, which are both managed by our team, which impact on and we can utilise for some of those activities. Other actions, it's an iterative plan, it's a living document. We're not saying we have all of the answers right now, but where we have to be confirmed in terms of some of those actions, what has been very clearly flagged is that any significant costs would need to go through council's processes like the long-term plan or annual plan before, as those commitments are made. And now we reach out. I've sent out, or what we have done is sent out a draft of the plan, but also a fuller presentation. This is a condensed version, with time being, precious for all of us. But in terms of questions, on this slide here, you can see on the right-hand side, you can also see the extent of the boundaries of the Ramsar site. And I just do want to highlight too how this plan also fits into a larger strategic point as well, which is the Coastal Reserves Management Plan intersects in terms of the boundary at that southern part of Foxton Beach, which is colloquially known as the Dune Garden area, which we've done a lot of restoration work, and the community have worked very, very hard on that, and which we've supported. So there's an intersection there of these strategies, really. That's all I have to say at this point, and just welcome any questions and discussions.
Just a quick question, Sean, in terms of, I see you talk about HDC's commitments. Are the other groups also committing to their roles or parts that they will play and they will be part of the plan as well, I assume?
Absolutely, Mayor Burney. And what I've just highlighted here for this presentation is how it relates to HDC specifically. Yeah. We're not alone. No, this is very much a joint effort, a collaborative effort between all of the agencies, all of our iwi partners, and as well as these key community groups, community and ecological groups, which everyone knows are very strong in this space.
And Sean, while there's clearly some really good community buy-in, the real thing is around uncertainty of funding. Would it be fair to say that great plan, but real uncertainty about where the funding will come from and the certainty going forward and the ability to make long-term decisions without that clarity around funding sources?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yes, absolutely. There are those uncertainties, but what I do have a lot of confidence is the abilities within that group to overcome some of those challenges, and they're not necessarily ones that have to be answered by, say, for example, HDC or HRC. We have a lot of firepower there, in my opinion, and a very, very good case for external funding, in my opinion. So I think the opportunities there are immense, and I think this process that we've worked through with the larger group have opened the eyes for those members actually to be very much pitching in on that basis.
Just noting too, I think it was on page 69, one of the threats identified to the estuary was the reopening of the river loop, I see. So I'm assuming, obviously, we want both to achieve both, because there's a real passion in Foxton to reopen it, but there is the risks that need to be managed there around the threat then to the estuary.
Council, it's about very much being aware of what those impacts are of that opening, so that all things can be coordinated and we're fully aware and respond accordingly. Yeah.
Kia ora, guys. Kia ora, Sean. Thank you very much for the kind words. Firstly, just wanted to acknowledge the piece of work, obviously, that's been done. And this goes my conflict for everyone else here that doesn't realise I've been sitting around that table since 2015, maybe earlier, long before I came into this role. But just really wanted to celebrate and endorse exactly what you've said today and some of the key movements that have happened. For those that don't know, the Manawatū Estuary had a significant amount of management plans across it from different organisations and different entities. And what was recognised some time ago was that the plans don't always collaborate or celebrate or work together. In fact, sometimes we found that they did completely the opposite, and potentially made the area unmanageable. So I'm really grateful, first and foremost, to HDC for the support that they've given over those years. And I know I'm sitting here as a councillor thanking myself, but I'm not really. Horizons, I think, really stepped up in this regard, and I want to just acknowledge Sam Ferguson and his role there, who really was a champion for Horizons, along with Te Kene and others. Doc also, I think they certainly changed their tune around coming on board and taking more of an active role and some responsibility that I think perhaps, if I was speaking from a community perspective, we felt they weren't fulfilling their obligations to the Ramsar, and it was HCC and HRC too. It was just this generic picture that people felt it was failing. So the group have done incredible to come together and create a plan that's actually based on all of the plans that I've just tried to share with you that there were. The amalgamation's been incredible. I want to acknowledge Te Awaho Foxton Community Board, the Foxton Beach community and the many groups. Save Our River Trust are huge in this space. Manawatū Estuary Trust, 4x4 New Zealand, and the many local fishermen and community champions that we have actually out there. And I'm not going to name them all, but there's so many people that come to those meetings and share their experience, their knowledge, their history, their aspirations, and it does work. This group of people have been meeting together for many, many years now, so they're very familiar with one another and they're very familiar with the goal. I also want other champions like Bird and Wildlife, and there are many others out there that I'm not going to name. Also wanted to acknowledge that we host this group at either Tans in Foxton, or also acknowledge the Manawatū Marine Boating Club. So most of the meetings and the workshops are held between those two sites, and very warmly welcomed we are when we go there. I think this plan, what it did for us too, was it helped us realise that there were things that we didn't know that needed protecting over others, so there wasn't really a prioritisation. But I'm going to say here that I think there was a win last year when the plan considered toheroa and tuna, two species that currently now sit on the endangered list in this country that are significant food resources to both Ngāti Raukawa and Moepopo. And so it's exciting that they've captured those and may help to build on what's needed to recover something around those two particular taonga species for our area. Sean, I'm going to give you a plug because actually I'm going to be completely honest here with my table. Sean was highly sought and requested for many years now, and he has been the face of this organisation alongside the other staff. I don't want to give it. The reality of it, Sean, was there was a real fear last year that you weren't going to be around for your own reasons or whatever, but they really saw you as a champion. They saw Monique's support of you, really incredible, and the work that's actually been undertaken. If people realise the hours, the time, the effort and the commitment that have gone into this, they would be quite overwhelmed, I'm sure. But you have to take a lot of kudos in this, Sean, because you've actually held it together. You've been real glue with Sian from HRC and others. So kudos to yourselves and your team and all of those that are supporting our community out there to do good things, because that's exactly what this thing is, and it will lead to a whole lot of other good things too in time. So I'll shut up now. Kia ora.
That was good. Thanks for comments, Justin, because they were very well earned. And also want to acknowledge you, Sean, without playing it too much. I've also been part of that group early on, but for various reasons haven't been part of it for some time. But you stuck through, and it was extremely challenging. Justin acknowledged too, extremely challenging at the start, is bringing all those groups together. It's never easy, as we know with other work that's in front of council at the moment in other areas, but you've managed to harness it and bring it together and produce some really good work. And the group, as Justin has to acknowledge, all that input from all those groups. So they're the bouquet. For me now, there's a brickbat, and it's not going to surprise you what I'm going to say. And Justin, the challenge will be to you, and as the iwi rep as well, as a Mayor Councillor and Foxton Councillor like us, there is a festering sore, and we have to acknowledge that. And I'm surprised that Ramsar designation there has not been challenged in terms of the ongoing desecration of that area by unruly vehicle use that's been highlighted in this council for many years, and yet the three statutory managers have done nothing about it. The police this year didn't even, and it's an enforcement issue as well, and I've challenged the police in writing. They didn't even do an operation this year on those areas. And it's been a free fall down there. I've been down there many days of summer, last night included, at Estuary, having dinner, swimming in the estuary with the grandkids, and being blasted by motocross bikes through that estuary, and quad bikes and vehicles up in the dune system. So while we're doing this marvellous work, and I read through this plan, which is fantastic, and don't get me wrong, I'm just highlighting this one aspect. For me, there's an absence of reality in saying it's all rosy, we're doing great work, when you walk out there, the local people walk out there, holiday makers walk out there, and I've been challenged time and time again, why do we allow this to happen all the time? And yet the 3 statutory managers and the groups that work with us continue to sit on their hands and do nothing. Yes, there's been some extra signs put in. Every time you look at that sign, you will look at the vehicle tracks going right past them. We do some fantastic planting, and we spend thousands of dollars there, and people get in there with their blood, sweat and tears and plant that stuff. We know it's not easy work, it's hard work. At the same time, you've got idiots in there and blasting through the planting. So yeah, congrats, all that stuff, fantastic work going on, but there is something we still have not addressed. I don't know how we're going to do it and whether there's ever going to be a wall around this table to do it. But until we do that, I don't think it's a victory. But that's a great piece of work, and I don't want to take away from that. So I just wanted to highlight that. But again, the challenge is there. What are we going to do about it?
Thank you, Councillor. So some of those challenges you're discussing are really about, I think the need to start to discuss about a beach bylaw. And so a beach bylaw is really about how we put in a framework that essentially allows us to manage some of these issues on the coast in a much more proactive manner. I think the other thing about that is about learning from what other councils, what has gone well and what hasn't gone well with beach bylaw, a beach bylaw approach to these challenges. For example, our counterparts down in Kapiti have got a beach bylaw and have had done for a good 15 years. They did an update in 2021. But my understanding from talking to officers from KCDC is that a lot of the challenges are about an enforcement and resourcing a response to accompany that bylaw. So the bylaw provides a fantastic framework, but it needs to be followed up with enforcement as well. So I guess that should be part of the discussions when we're talking about this politically as we go forward.
And just to note for the record that the Hearings Committee, when it was considering the Public Places Bylaw, although it didn't formally resolve, there was a will around the table that we do press on with consideration of the bylaw. So just to give a little bit of hope, that the council hopefully will move forward on this.
And just to follow up on that, and you're right, Sean, and there's always, but we are, one of our blessings and one of our, I guess, problems are we've got many kilometres of drivable beach, and in years, the social fabric of those communities, as I've said, has been built on access to our coastline. So it's an expectation. To some, it's an absolute right, and for all many good reasons. But an example of what you can do through through bylaw and through good public education and good communication and collaboration with the agencies involved is the speed limits we put on in 217 or whatever it was. I think it was at 217. So it took the beaches from the open road speed limit down to 30 kilometres an hour. That has made a massive difference along those beaches, from Waitere, Wakawa, through to Foxton Beach, up to Matangi. It's made a huge difference. It's taken that speed right away from that. So it becomes a culture. It has become a culture where it's not a high speed zone; it's a low speed zone. So bylaws are effective. In my view, bylaws are just as effective by being by enforcement, but also public education and that the ownership that people take in protecting their environment. At the moment, there seems to be no ownership down there because it's just like, what can you do? We've got a big role to play in leadership. The statutory managers have a big role to play. We just need someone to push that button and say, we're going to lead this and make this happen. Until we do, this is great, but I don't think it's not the gold-plated thing it should be.
I'm just going to kind of reiterate what Sean said previously, in that though a number of those items that you just raised there, Councillor Brannigan, regarding signage, education, and a bylaw, what are all actions within that management plan. So they're certainly all on the radar. And outside of the beach bylaw, there are others within the community who can support, that education and signage in particular, and fencing as well, to kind of help drive that culture of change, as you mentioned.
I think the other part that humbles me with it too, though, is that when we're talking about a coastal reservation plan, I did hear you say that MEMT will certainly be helping to assist in that work, but I'm also very mindful that MEMT is specific to that Foxton, the estuary, and so I think we're really lucky to have a group like that deal with that scenario at Foxton, because they actually know how they may want to use the beach for Ross in the future, blah blah blah. And they might actually help form maybe some guidelines about how we deal with other parts of our coastal areas, but they're going to be treated extremely different, I'm quite sure, as we get to each part of our coast. So I just wanted to put that out there openly, because I wouldn't like MEMT to be tasked with next minute they're being blamed for something in Manawatū that they had nothing to do with saying.
Thanks for that, Councillor Tamihana. What I would say is that what it shows, and what I've seen from the participants in that group, is very much taking a holistic view. They do not go, this is just, our area here. It's actually, they take a much broader view about the improvements and the difference that they can make in that broader coastal area. So if there are no other questions, just some final words here. So how this fits into the top priorities is something we haven't mentioned. Actually, we did have it on our condensed plan, but I'm just going to go through it. We have one of Council's top priorities is about enriching our environment, and we have some key actions under there. That actually this plan does align quite strongly with. So we're talking about protection and restoration of that natural habitat of the estuary space. Definitely one of the key aspects in terms of those actions we're trying to achieve. It also aligns quite strongly with Council's climate action plan as well, in terms of responsible management of what, let's remember, it's an internationally recognised site. So that's, us managing that well responsibly through everyone's collective efforts is extremely important. And the other thing too is that promotion of the environmental stewardship. So the increased profile of the Ramsar site, including the education initiatives, are going to be incredibly important. And Justin, you just mentioned before about that, and Ross mentioning about raising the profile and the education side of it. That's a real positive in terms of this group, and that's one of the reasons why one of the work streams that is fairly new to what we've been talking about, for many years to date, is that community engagement team. So I think what's going to happen is, in conjunction with, say, our council and Horizon's communications team, I think there's going to be a lot more proactivity as part of that community engagement team to all work together about raising the profile, how important that site is, and how important protecting that environment is actually quite key to the resilience of that town. So what we'd like is just over the next 2 weeks to get feedback from councillors. If you can reflect on what's been said today, and if something pops into people's minds about that hasn't been covered today, by all means get an email through to us. And the final plan in terms of the information report will be taken to the community board, is what we are planning, and then come through to council that way. So I've highlighted there that yes, it's a non-statutory plan, but that's the way that we intend to bring it back forward to inform councillors about the completion of that process. Thank you.